my friends tried so many interventions with me, I just leave the plastic folding chairs set up in a semicircle in my apartment. It's true. So, no, does anyone drink on the job? Now, a couple tricks. I want to say something. For those of us who have to drink on the job or have drunk on the job, a couple tips. When you come back from work, do not give advice. You will want to, of course, because you'll be drunk. Just listen and agree. Nod. I don't care if you see four of the same person. Just go, yep. Yep. And make sure you're leaning up against a wall. Do not lean up against a cubicle. You'll fall right through.
So hi Vanessa, how have you been and how is life treating you?
Well, life has been treating me just fine, and I'm currently not doing ships. I was on them for almost 5 years straight. So I'm back in New York and just doing a bunch of land gigs and working on two shows that I've been developing. And one is, there's a big interest in it,
Okay.
called The Divine Rascal. And it's about my father, Michael Hollingshead, and Timothy Leary, and bringing, and my dad gave LSD to Timothy Leary for the first time and also to Paul McCartney.
Okay.
And he got completely forgotten about, and Leary got all the credit. And my dad also lived in Nepal for a couple years and believed very highly in Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion.
But writing such a show and working on such a show must be really like stressful. So have you been doing something, to relieve your stress or like meditation or yoga, something like that?
I've been taking hot yoga now for 16 years.
16 years.
16 years. So I'm still inflexible, but I have a lot of strength, and I love the yoga practice, and I meditate when I can. And then I also take high intensity interval training. And I pride myself on being able to keep up with the 20-year-olds, with the exception of burpees. And I do my comedy. It gives me a lot of joy, and my friendships. But my life, probably like yours, is one of just constant work. I've been a comedian now for 34 years, with the exception of COVID, where I didn't really do it. So more like 33 years. I was teaching comedy at the time during COVID, and that was a very dark period of my life because I really, my sense of identity and who I was, very similar to men, was defined by what I did. And when all that was
Yes.
taken away from me, it was the beginning of probably needing to believe in something higher than myself. And that's when I met people I didn't even know that encouraged me to teach comedy. And it was the students that really kind of brought me back to life, because I was busy doing that. And then right as the end of COVID came, I started working in an animal shelter. I ended a relationship with somebody that was very mean. And the animals kind of brought me back to life. The students brought me back to life. And then I started working on the ships, and that kind of got me right back into comedy again.
We talked about your challenges. Now let's bring back something, happy. Do you remember getting your first laugh on stage? When you got the first laugh, your first joke that killed, and how did it feel?
I remember I was working in offices. I was doing two jobs. I was working as a temp in offices down on Wall Street, and then I was doing open mics at night. And I remember I would just see comedians do set up, punch. And I remember having a horrible day at my office where my boss just talked down to me. And I remember he said, "This means hold my calls. This means take a message." And I just looked at
Yeah.
him, and he's like, "Do you understand what I'm saying? This means hold my calls. This means take a message." And I was like, yes, I do. And we both looked at each other like, please don't insult my intelligence. And I remember he'd be busy working away, and I would do that. He would do this, and that, I was taking the messages. And I remember when he would go to lunch, I remember saying to like the whole pool of secretaries, "And this means I won't be coming in tomorrow." And they all started laughing. And he would always talk down to me. And I just said, "Mr. Plumpkin, I'm trying to get everything done. I'm trying to figure out this and this. And I'm trying to do everything you want and set up the files and set up the meetings and get all this done. But I'm only one person and you have a lot of meetings. So just give me a chance. I'll figure it out." And it was almost when I yelled at him that he backed off and was very respectful. And I'm like, I was so afraid I'd get fired, but I didn't. So um, all of my early comedy that got me my first development deal was all based on real life, working in offices, what I had to do, to survive. And it ended up the people that were watching me were all hardworking people, basically working class. It was working, comedy was basically shining a light on the truth. And I, even though my parents were both artistic, I always, you know, I always identified with the working class, but I always understood, you know, what you like beauty and art and culture and music. But to me, it was the working class that always made the wheels go around. So I never separated myself from them. And the the guy that ran the comic strip, Lucian Holt, we eventually got married, he said I would love to watch all the women secretaries that were in there just going crazy when you would start to talk about what it was like working in an office. And I was making fun of the paper clip guy, the Spanish guy. That was when it was okay to do Spanish, to do black, to do Indian. I mean, if I do Indian accent, it's got to be Deepak because he's got a lot of money and now he's on the Epstein list. I can't like the that all that has been taken away from me. So I've had to kind of figure out how to work smarter so that no one feels offended, no one feels marginalized, no one knows them. And all my humor was all based on the sweet part of people, the sweet part of
Okay.
humanity. It was never based on, you know, just going after anybody. So I had to be very careful. And that was when I was working on ships years ago, and then years as the woke thing started, where I just got terribly depressed. And I'm like, this is like a corporate job. I would have like a cruise director say, this Jewish couple got offended by the jokes you did about the Germans. And I'm like, if anyone should be offended, it should be the Germans. This was never to offend Jewish. And I was always having to skirt on being edgy and then wanting to be original and then having to kind of lose jokes, lose characters, lose all the things I was doing. And I remember just looking up constantly. I would be up through the night, just looking up, woke, politically correct. And it was literally like Whoopi Goldberg saved my life. Like I was just at a point where it's like, I just as well maybe go back to an office because this is what this has become. And Whoopi Goldberg said, you can let the whole thing of politically correct and wokeism like make you bitter and angry and sarcastic, or you can just figure out how to work smarter. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, let me figure out how to work a little bit smarter and outsmart the system that I'm in because I chose this profession. And that was kind of the beginning of me just doing things a little bit differently.
I think things have changed, that people have started getting offended on behalf of someone.
Yes, with their
And,
virtue signaling, their
and a lot of
bullshit.
people, yeah, and a lot of people think that punching down is being mean, and they don't consider punching down being a part of comedy anymore. What do you think about that? Punching down and punching up on someone?
Um, it's all in context. Like it's like they cherry pick what they're going to be offended about and what they're not. Like I remember going on stage saying, "You know what I'm offended by? I'm offended by people that are easily offended." Okay? Because this is a comedy show. I'm not your teacher. I'm not I'm not running for office. It's now easier to be a politician than it is to be a comedian. And people, there was things like, if you're easily offended, um, please don't come to the show. There was like always things before the show started so that people wouldn't be offended. And it depends on the comedian punching up or punching down. If the comedian has got a lot of heart and is saying something and making fun of everybody, which I did, I would do because I was a trained actress. So before I was a comedian, I had, I went to Lee Strasberg Acting Institute for 6 years and had scholarships. I was going to be trained to be a Shakespearean actor. And so my training was I could easily make fun of anybody, but it was all done in such a loving way. So someone might be offended if I did an Indian joke and not be offended if I did a black joke. But it's like I'm making fun of everybody in a very loving way. If you choose to be offended, it's like, how is my jokes going to impact your life when you were never forced to come to a comedy club? But it
Do you think?
could get me thrown off a ship.
Yes.
What they started to do with ships is it was so easy to get rid of a comedian than to say lose the joke. And if someone was like a Pinnacle member or high up, or they could just say, I want that comic off the ship. He's offensive. And I didn't know, and some of it was to get a free cruise, to get a free bottle of champagne. So we became like the scapegoats in a way. So I'm really, why are you offended when I'm just trying to be, this is the truth the way I see it? It's not to offend anybody. It's like, I'm shining light on the truth. This is how I see it. And it used to be if someone didn't like a comic, they would just go, you know what, honey, it's not my cup of tea. Let's just leave. Not to take your career away from you. That's the name of the game now, to troll you, to destroy your career. So who is actually more at fault with being offensive?
It's actually horrifying for every comic out there that you have to cut out your best material just to please the audience.
Yeah.
And do you think that audience nowadays think that comedy, they have to take away something from comedy rather than just laughing? They go to a comedy show and they're like, okay, we'll learn something, we'll find something about the society, it might change me. Rather than just laughing, they have a lot of thoughts while going to a comedy show.
Sometimes I feel the audience, it depends on the audience. Like they can decide universally to not find you funny. I remember like one young girl went, ooh, and I was talking about, toxic masculinity and how I grew up. And, I do a joke. I said, no one gives you compliments anymore, with thank you, hashtag me too. Like the only person that gives me compliments is the homeless doorman at 7-Eleven. He says, have a blessed day, beautiful. And I give him $1. I used to get paid a compliment, and I got to pay to get a compliment, which I gladly take because I need that compliment. I guess as women now, we're supposed to look at ourselves and go, you're enough. Yeah, I love you just the way you are. No one's sexualizing you. I'm like, well, I know I need a compliment. And I'm like, yeah, no wonder. I think, no one's having sex anymore because men aren't giving women compliments. At
Exactly.
least if you give a guy gives a woman a few choice compliments, chances are he's definitely going to get to first base, which is now I guess we have AI boyfriends and girlfriends.
Yeah.
We're alienated. This phone has now become um, everything. It's like there's no connection anymore. There's no looking at people. There's no touching people. There's no hugging somebody. And I do a bit and I say, I remember I said construction workers, they'd be drilling, they'd be like, hey baby, you want to see my drill bit? And I'd be thinking, oh, how disgusting. Well, at least I look good. And I remember when I used to work in an office, my boss would slap my ass and go, nice skirt, Hollingshead. And I thought, I'm getting that promotion. You remember when a man used to be a man? There was no safe word. There was no let's do pineapple if you don't feel safe. And he'd knock all the papers off the desk. You'd have a little afternoon delight. He'd have his way with you. And you couldn't go to the head of human resources and go, he was being sexually inappropriate. He was the head of human resources. That's how we got promoted. That's how we made things better for this generation and other generations of women. So we took the bullet, so to speak. So if we can make things better for you, obviously, can I get a compliment every once in a while? And then I looked at the young girl and I'm like, you see how things are different, but how we made things better? And she couldn't say a word. I'm like, you didn't, nothing? Okay, yeah, just want to explain a couple things.
I think this is one of the best way to deal with hecklers, that you don't like shut them up, you just make them think, okay, okay, I was wrong.
Make them think, yeah.
And
Yeah.
one more thing about people like taking jokes seriously, like literally. So when George Carlin,
Yeah, I try and be like he was my mentor, but what's happening now? Well, Bob Odenkirk said it brilliantly. I just listened to him because I listen to new comedians. My job as an older woman is I don't want to separate myself from the young girls. I always want to be like the older sister, the friend. The I don't want to be like, in my day I don't want to do that. It separates me from a whole bunch of young women and young men that I always want to reach for, which Carlin was able to do. He every decade didn't
he'll
matter if
use
you were
the
18
audience.
or
He would use
88, everyone was seeing Carlin.
exactly.
Um, just and so I didn't want to keep myself separate. So I had to find it. So I always had to watch comedy. And so much of it had gotten so blue, or women would look really cute and sexy, the young girls, and then they would talk about, anal sex or, diva cups or whatever they were talking about. And there was no punchline. I'm like, I don't care if you do sexual material, but have a punchline. Don't do stuff for shock value. And Bob Odenkirk said, he said, what's happening with comedy is everybody, instead of being edgy or talking about political stuff, the Epstein files, what's going on in the country, everyone doesn't want to offend the right or the left, but we can talk about sex as much as we want. Um, so I was so when Bob Odenkirk said every comedian now is going for and he goes and he named names like famous comedians, they're going for low-hanging fruit. And what is low-hanging fruit? Low-hanging fruit is the fruit that's rotten. And we take that stuff and we shove it into audiences' faces and we go eat it because that's what we're giving you. And he goes, yeah, so no, I don't really watch comedy like I used to.
It's deep, like rotten fruits.
Hmm?
Bob Odenkirk is one of the smartest, not just comedians, but as a person. Is an
Yeah.
I And about George Carlin, we were talking. So people, when George Carlin was performing in the days, what I have heard that people would go to his shows and just laugh it out. But nowadays, people are finding George Carlin videos and making sure that it changes their life. They're taking, rather than laughs, they are taking life lessons from a stand-up artist. So, do you think that stand-up artist role should be giving life lessons or just to make people laugh?
I always saw George, like when I saw George Carlin in concert, I actually opened for him once,
Okay.
and it was a very small audience. And I said, I'm so sorry, Mr. Carlin, there's so few people here. And he goes, oh, I don't mind that there's a few people. I just need to listen to how the words come out. I'm fine. I just need to hear my words. I'm like, wow, would I ever get to a point where I just don't care how many people are in the audience. I just need to hear them words. And that happened. That happened to me where someone said, I'm so sorry, Vanessa, it's such a small crowd tonight. I'm like, no, I'm getting ready to do a show. I just need to listen how the words come out. And I realized, oh my God, like over 30 years later, I know what a joke is and I know the laughs I'm looking and I know what has to be developed. So he was to me like a professor and a philosopher about life. He just was beyond any, he's still, when I get sad about comedy or not interested or don't find anyone all that funny, I just listen to him and I'm just reminded to tell the truth and to make it funny. Don't preach, just tell the truth. And I do a whole bit now on women losing weight through the ages. And I feel Carlin-esque, how what we did
Yes.
all the years. And then I bring it back to looks maxing, which men do. And I try and, so, I always get told that I remind everybody of Joan Rivers, and I love Joan Rivers,
Really?
but I love it when every once in a while they say, that was very Carlin-esque. I'm like, okay. But he was Carlin and Pryor talked about the truth, and I had like addiction issues, which I made fun of, when I had various addictions that I conquered. And I would just talk about it, just like Pryor would talk about it.
So,
Um,
what's your favorite Carlin bit, if you have one? Yeah, that you can remember on
oh
top
my
of your head.
God, my
Just one,
favorite.
just one. You have to pick only one. Okay, so my favorite, I'll just tell you my favorite is the one where he talks about that there's an invisible man in the sky and he always needs money. And you talk about a good bullshit story. Holy shit. That's my favorite Carlin bit. So, what's yours?
Mine is when he talks about how we soften words. When he does the bit on the military, he goes,
Yes.
you remember like during the Korean War, it was shell shock. That sounded, and then we changed it a little around a bit, and then we had the Vietnam War, and it was uh I'm trying to think of what war it was like called battle fatigue. Just a little, add a couple more syllables with battle fatigue. And then the other war, I guess oh God, the Middle
I
East,
remember the bit. I remember the bit, but I don't remember the joke.
yes.
I would
And then it
definitely.
became post-traumatic stress disorder. More syllables, same condition, same condition. For the war in Iran, with George Bush the first, that one that we were involved in, Desert Storm, post-traumatic stress disorder. It added more syllables, still softened everything. Maybe if they would have called it shell shock, these men would have gotten the help they needed. And I just was crying, you know? That was my favorite bit.
Not only for Carlin, you went for Pryor also. And how was the experience working with two of the
I
greatest of
opened for
comedy?
Richard Pryor. I opened for Richard Pryor, and it was one of the proudest moments I had. I was at every night I would go to the Comedy Store and say, I'm a comedian from New York. I'd love to, I headline in New York. And they're like, well, you're not in New York, you're in LA. And every night I'd go to the Comedy Store, park my car, wait there for 3, 4 hours. They'd never let me up. And then Richard Pryor comes in and no one wants to open for him because everyone is there to see Richard Pryor. Now,
Exactly.
I grew up in an all-black neighborhood in the
Okay.
60s, late 60s, so I had material about growing up in a ghetto in Bed-Stuy, which was one of the worst. I think it was worse than Harlem. Everyone like do or die Bed-Stuy, and I was like the only white girl, me and my mom in an all-black neighborhood. And my dad, both my parents were like drug addicted, alcoholic hippies. So I had a whole
Okay.
bit on being like the straight daughter of these two crazy hippie types. And no one wanted to open for Richard Pryor. So they said, hey, Vanessa, we're going to put you up. And I knew they were waiting for me to fail, just fall flat on my ass. And I had my material already. And I said, yeah, I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I used to feel like the little white squiggle on a Hostess cupcake before someone took a bite out of it. And I said, my mom moved to an all-black neighborhood, and I used to live right down, Bed-Stuy. I used to live right downstairs from the Black Panther Party. And I used to hear the white man keeps me down, the white man keeps me down. That was my mom, nasty divorce. And I remember I went to an all black. My mom wanted to go to a Baptist church to sing in the choir, something that wouldn't humiliate, embarrass me because my mom wore a bra over her dress. And I remember seeing a painting of the Last Supper, and Jesus and all his disciples were black, except for Judas, who was white. I thought it was a picture of the Temptations with their manager. You know, I didn't know. I didn't know as a kid. And I killed. I didn't expect it. I just knew that I was going to be fine. And then Richard Pryor has me come over to him, his guard, his bodyguard, say, come over. And he said, that was great. That was really great. And then I thanked him and I was crying and I said, it was an honor. You were my inspiration to just tell the truth. And then they bring Richard Pryor up in his wheelchair to to what's going on, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. And I'm just watching the audience. He could barely talk. And the audience is like joking with him. They're like, Richard, we can't hear you. But everything was just done out of love. There was just so much love for him. And Mitzi Shore saw me. And I went from like being a complete unknown to opening for Richard Pryor. And this was like before there was like cell phones. And I remember taking my car, new driver, and just the marquee said Richard Pryor and Vanessa Hollingshead, in the big room. And that was one of the greatest times I ever had in LA, which I hated, but I will never have a photograph of that. It'll just be in my memory, in my heart. So
Just listening to your story is giving me goosebumps. I'm not kidding. Because I can imagine you being all animated while doing your bit. And on the other hand, you must be having this pressure that I'm warming the room for Richard Pryor now. And
yeah. And I knew they
talking,
were throwing me to the wolves. I knew they were waiting. They're like, yeah, Vanessa, you can go up. And I'm like, God, if you've ever been with me, just be with me now. Just be with me now. And I just started with my hippie parent stuff and then went right into my British dad doing LSD and me taking LSD by accident into my parents, into Bed-Stuy, into that bit. And then talking about my mom being the pothead. And, no one had ever seen me, but Richard knew, probably knew that some of that was true, but it was the moment when his bodyguards said he wants to talk to you. And I just sat next, like he was in his wheelchair, and I just kneeled below him, just crying, just saying, you're my reason that I tried so hard to just be so honest because you're so brilliantly funny. When you talked about being addicted to cocaine, how your friend helped you, and you made it funny. You made addiction funny.
you made setting up on getting on fire funny. And,
Yes. Yeah, with the match. Yeah. And that
okay,
was so painful.
this might be getting too overwhelming for you, so I would like to ask you something. So you are a very animated comedian, like you act out, you do physical stuff. So do you think that physical comedy in particular is dying now? Because people like to act out, but they don't want to, be funny with their bodies anymore. There are
I really don't care. I love Lucille Ball, and she made a fool out of herself, and I never mind. I never mind going all the way. I always say, if you're going to do an act out, do it with everything you've got. You can always sell a joke that way too. Like, even if your writing is a little just trying to figure it out, you can just be larger than life and go, oh, let me tell you about this marvelous cup of tea I had. It was absolutely extraordinary. Of course, I was the only one who liked it, It's like you can
uh,
just take something and go and just you go, let me tell you something. Now I don't know you, I don't like you, but I'm gonna give you the job. You got that? Don't fuck up. So like you can
oh
just
man.
and then you back off. And then so you can sometimes, when you have a new joke, you can just sell it on being larger than life. Because I do a bit, I just started working on this new bit I don't know if you saw this show called Hidden Rivalries.
Yeah.
Hidden Rivalries. And it's like my friends like you've got to see Hidden Rivalries. It's like these gay guys with these perfect asses and it's really intimate and you get to know like to understand gay guys and it's just like a hot show. It's real hot. I'm like, what? I don't want to see guys with perfect asses. I really don't. My ass is now looking like a deflated balloon, okay? And I don't want to see gay guys having sex. I don't even want to see straight people having sex. The only person I want to see having sex is me having sex, okay? I'm like, you know what show would turn me on? A show about a guy with a full head of gray hair that's in therapy and loves cats, all right? And he'd be like, I am now in Egypt and I'm just digging up the sarcophagus. And it's with, I look at it and it's like 600 mummified cats, all more bejeweled than the other ones. Absolutely extraordinary. Now, in Egypt, if you killed a cat because they were considered gods, and I still think they do, you would be killed. And it's like, but this is like just absolutely extraordinary, these beautiful, exquisite creatures. I'm like, oh my God, I want you. Now, next on the next episode of Catman, I am actually going to rescue a cat with one eye and one leg. Thank you and good night. Be like, yes,
Yes.
I am in love.
Oh,
So I took now, if I would have done that straight, it
would
wouldn't
have
have had,
bombed.
but
It would
when
have
you
bombed
do it larger than life, you can do that bit.
because you can.
And no one can take it away from you because I'm like, good, let me see you go act that out the way I do, because no one does.
I think the way you acted it out, you kind of, even if I'm like laying down, you brought my energy to your level with all the acting out, and that's what made it funny. And that's what made it interesting. Like, okay, I'm now involved in the story. And I think that this is something that acting out comedians are not getting these days. Like, there are only a few left. So,
Yeah.
but if you don't act it out, do you think that without acting anything out, you can, hold the room for, an hour or so? That if you're not moving on stage,
Yeah, there's comedians like you've got comedians like
Louis C.K., you can say,
Louis C.K., if you watch him, he does some act outs. He will do some act outs. Like my favorite bit he does is a Zerthandipus about talking about the
ah,
spoiled kid. I have watched that 9 times. One of my favorite bits, but if you watch Louis, he does a story, really goes out there. He does a lot of sexual stuff too, but he also does the act outs with Zerthandipus, and then he brings it right back like a good comedian does a big act out and then pulls it in. Act out, pulls it in. So he actually does act outs. But Todd Barry, just just straight one line, just mellow, 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 and he can just pull the audience in. Because for somebody that's larger than life, I am always fascinated by comedians that can just do, set a punch, set a punch, set a punch. But as I began to develop as a comedian, I realized that wasn't for me. I tried. That was like the square peg trying to fit in the round hole. It just
yes.
wasn't me. But I tried so hard to do set a punch, especially if I do roast material, which I didn't particularly like doing, because that I found mean spirited. That I found real punching down, and I didn't want to hurt people's feelings because I grew up, picked on and bullied. So it was very hard for me to go pick on people and bully them. But I did a roast for Patrice O'Neill, and that's where I did some of my darker set up punch, set up punch, set up punch. But
Okay, I'm
I'm not,
talking about
I think I think comedians that roast, it's an art within itself. But sometimes they get really mean and they hurt people. They hurt people's feelings.
But when you talk about roasting, you talk about Joanne Rivers, which you have been compared to. Joanne Rivers and Don Rickles.
Yes, but they had a warmth about them. Like Well, Joan could be pretty biting, but Don Rickles was lovable. He would roast people, but he had this warmth, like the warmth came out in him. The warmth about Don Rickles would always come out, or Dean Martin, or, all of them. It was never to go for the jugular. And I
Yeah.
sometimes think some of these roasts now, and as usual with women, they just make fun of you getting old. You know, they don't do that with men, but they do that with women. And I think as being a woman comedian, we have to work twice as hard to get half the laughs.
And I think the journey for a woman comedian has never been easy because you can see that, okay, it started with Lucille Ball, Joan Rivers, but then it took a dip, a sudden dip that comedians would have to reinvent themselves. Even though there were comedians like Wanda Sykes were like, trying to put it up there. There were comedians, but it got like really hard in the early 2000s, I guess. So how did you deal with times like that when it was really hard globally for women comics?
I just kept doing what I was doing, and just whatever I found funny. And during the time of where everyone was getting offended, I thought I have to open with a joke so that I can change being a comedian in many respects is like being a psychologist. You get on stage, you literally you've got to case the room, like the drunk white guys, the married couple, the girls' night out, who might be a problem, who might, like, you've got literally your mind is going like this. And then, you have to kind of figure out, okay, how can I do this? And then I've got 30 seconds to make sure that they like me. So if I'm working for like a bunch of Southerners that don't like Northern women or don't like the North or just think that everyone from New York is some liberal, I've got 30 seconds to kind of change that energy. And sometimes I would open, I was like, everyone gets offended really easily. You say the wrong thing and they get offended. I did a joke the other day, and a woman is like, I'm really offended by your joke because I'm lactose intolerant. I'm like, I made fun of cheese. And she's like, no, you made fun of white American cheese. It's like I don't have any jokes on minority cheeses, like blue cheese, like cheeses of color. Like I like blue cheese. I don't know what's in white American cheese. That's why I'm making fun of it. So here we are arguing about cheese. And then I went to Urban Outfitters and I got this leathery like jacket. And I said to the woman, like, what's this material? She goes, oh, it's vegan leather. I'm like, oh, would you skin an eggplant? Like you can't say pleather? Is pleather too 80s? Is it too uncool? So I looked up vegan leather and it's made with polycellulose, polymers, polyester. Doesn't cow sound more organic? You know what we ought to do is just wear leather, wait for the cow to die of old age and be like, hey, nice jacket. How come it's so wrinkled? So when I open like that, like then they're softened to like, can I take you with me on my little journey? Or are we going to be offended too easily?
That was very Carlin-esque because I would say that Carlin. I'm sorry, I'm talking so much about George Carlin because I love him a
I don't
lot.
care. I love George Carlin.
So he used to start his specials with this joke that how come people who are against abortion are the people you wouldn't want to fuck
Yes,
in the first
you
place?
wouldn't want to fuck anyway. It's brilliant. Now people will get offended.
And so you already said that you have been evolving because you want to, resonate with every audience. So how hard it is, how much courage it takes that you're like, okay, if I do this joke, I might lose some of my old audience. So for 34 years, you have been evolving and it takes a lot of courage. How do you gather such courage? Or do you just love doing it? That's all.
Well, there's I would always say to myself, I remember someone said, you know, Vanessa is somebody that just she needs an audience to love her. And then someone said, no, that's not what she needs. She needs to educate people. I always have seen myself as like, this is my persona is confidently underconfident. And this is just the way I see things. So come with me, because this is the funny way I see stuff. And also I love doing crowd work. I always said, stand up, I've got my greatest hits, which is like rock music or the classics. And then when I can actually joke with the audience or talk to the audience or do crowd work, that's like jazz. That's where I get to be free. That's where we get to have a funny repartee. That's when you throw out all your material and you're like on a tightrope and and sometimes you do so well with the crowd work that when you go back to your regular jokes, they're like, nah, I really liked when she was talking to so and so. But I guess what I try and do with the audience is, you know, I really try and feel them out a little bit. And wait a second, what exactly was the question again? Now I'm gonna
The question was that how do you gather courage to,
Oh,
keep
gather courage.
resonating?
It's not, I'm dying when I come up with a bit that I love. I just can't, I'm like I just like, I feel like I'm a bull in a bullpen that just can't wait to just try it. Like with the Ozempic thing.
Yes.
Everyone's on Ozempic, and these actresses that are already thin are on Ozempic, and then they're lying about it. They're like, no, I'm just juicing or I'm eating better. I've gone keto. I'm like, you just lost 80 fucking pounds. Come on. Don't tell me you're not on Ozempic. And I'm like, ever since I said women have been wanting to be thin since the beginning of time, since Adam looked at Eve and said, you know what? Lay off those apples because you're getting a fat ass. Now let's go through history. The 50s, we had cigarettes. The 60s, you had amphetamines. The 70s, you had fen-phen. Of course, maybe you know, had a heart attack, but you left a pretty corpse. The 80s, of course, we had cocaine, which was a wonderful decade. The 90s, you had heroin chic. But there was a story about it. It's like, hello, my name is Anna Rexia. And then I just act like, go around the stage like acting like a model. And then the 90s, you had heroin, and then the 2000s, you had the jab where there was no work, you just didn't want to eat. Now, and people are like, Vanessa, how'd you lose all that weight? And I said, well, I lost it the old-fashioned way: trauma, depression, alcohol, shame, and cocaine. And that weight slowly comes off. And worst case scenario, I'll just steal my friend's son's Adderall, you know, but there's a work ethic to it. You know, I'll lose that extra 5 pounds. He won't get addicted to it. Neither will I. So that's how I try. And I said, now you got the men with the looks maxing, with their banging, their chiseling, their face with a hammer, and they're taking steroids and they're taking methamphetamine to look good. And everyone's acting like this is the new thing men are doing to look good. I'm like, really? You women, we've been foot binding, we've been taking tapeworms, we've been wearing corsets that makes our waist in 18 inches. We've been taking arsenic, and you're just banging your face with a hammer. Did you ever like have your face cut and stretched? Did you have things put into your breasts? I said, welcome to our world. We've been doing this shit since we were 5.
See, this is what it is. Like, these jokes are relatable and they come with a punchline. And I think there are a lot of people now, like most of the comments are that okay, if I just say something relatable, people would laugh. But this bit is relatable. It brings back a lot of memories and it comes with a lot of punchlines and a lot of tags. So I think this is a complete joke. This is a complete bit, I would say.
Yeah, and then I started working on when I started like studying, because what I do is I study, I study, I
Yes.
study, and then I'm like, okay, why is I said, did anyone see Demi Moore in The Substance? Like, did you see The Substance?
Yes, I have.
She was fucking just woman in her 60s, absolutely beautiful. The whole point of it was like, if you could have just loved yourself growing old gracefully. She had a beautiful body, beautiful, like everything. And then she just starts taking this
Weird ass substance just to
Ozempic
get young.
just to, no, in real life, yeah, just the substance to just like
Yes.
the, just
Awesome.
wanting to be young. But then you see her in real life where she's just disappearing. And I said, why are women starving themselves to be like not just thin, but bony, skeletal? They're going to find a way. They're going to be like, you know what? We figured out a way that we can actually go into your hip bone and shave your hip bones off so that you are really thin. And then I just hold the mic stand up.
The
I'm like, so is this what's happening? Is the new thing for women to basically just disappear? Is this the Hollywood standard to just disappear?
And you just mentioned studying. So a lot of people also don't know that stand-up comedy means you have to study a lot.
All the time. Read everything, study everything, look at trends, look at like, why is Hollywood making this the ideal? Like, if you keep starving yourself and not eating, it's like your brain's not getting food. You're gonna have osteoporosis. You're gonna have all these things, and everyone's looking at these emaciated with the bone. Now it's not enough to have like your ribs sticking out. Now it's like, oh, my bones and my back are sticking out. For what? For what Hollywood standard? And it's like when you're young, you could be naturally thin, but when you're like in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, the face and they're getting the buccal fat sucked. I don't, it's not, and the lips being plumped up. Like, what is going on here? Like, if we're so focused on looking a certain way and then lying about it, no, I just juice now and I do yoga. No, I never had anything done. No, I never really. No, I just, I feel good about who I am. I think I look fresh. No, you look different. You don't look younger. You look different.
Okay, and I was asking about how much do you study? Like, what materials do you study? Do you read books or do you just watch stand-up bits? To prepare. How much do you study?
I watch, well, if I do, like if I'm working on material and I can't say get regular, sometimes I get spots on regular shows and I can work stuff out. But when I had to do the ships, I always had to do like tried and true because I had to always make sure that I got invited back. This was my bread and butter. So now that I'm off ships for a while, I get to be free again. And I have written um like a lot more material in the time I've had off, but um I do a lot of like I go on YouTube and I look up the looks maxing, I look up clavicular, look what he's doing. He recently had an OD. I think he had like methamphetamine and then had tire fluid, whatever this guy did. So I look him up, and then I go through the podcasts on Ozempic, what's going on with Ozempic, why are people starving themselves? And then I look at like the beauty standards in South Korea. Women now are getting those elf ears in South Korea.
Yes.
They're having their ears extended. Then they're taking Sculptra and they're putting it in their head so that their head looks like a baby. And I said in South Korea, it's not even about looking young. It's like having that baby looks. You have a 20-year-old that looks like a friggin' baby, and this gets shaved and the eyes get bigger. And sometimes, this sculpture backs, ends up making you bald. But it's like we are so preoccupied with the outsides and everything with the looks maxing is to get the girls from the outsides. And I just say, you know what? If you develop your personality and come up with some jokes, you wouldn't have to worry about doing all that because women would want to fuck you. I can't tell you how many ugly comedians I have met that are dating very pretty girls. You know why?
Right.
Because they happen to be funny and they happen to have developed your personality. Maybe if you would develop your personality a little bit, go out and date a little bit more instead of thinking that everything was about how you look, you might have the very thing you wanted without having to bang your friggin', cheeks with a hammer.
Okay, so I would be like concluding this interview with just a couple of questions left. So, who are the comedians, up and coming comedians you're looking, you're looking for that up and coming promising comedians?
Right now, um, I just I'll see some comedians, I can't even remember their names, where I'll think, you know, they've got something. I'm pretty good at spotting talent. I can't remember the names offhand. Um, and some of the old comedians are, I feel like when you're hungry, like I've seen, I can't even remember the names, like some comedians from out of England or in Australia are pretty clever. I really like some of the European comedians. I know I love Ricky Gervais.
Yes.
Um, I love Bill Burr. I love Louis C.K. And I couldn't even do a joke. Like I said, Louis C.K., if Louis would have said, listen, I'm putting you on the Louis show, but do you mind if I masturbate? I'd be like, okay, is the contract signed? So I'm going to be on your show. Yeah, go ahead and masturbate. Go ahead. It wouldn't even faze me. Like the women, at least we're used to this kind of stuff. We wouldn't be like, I wanted to say all these women that said, he masturbated and I don't have a career. I'm like, you didn't even have a career to begin
Yeah.
with. Why are you blaming Louis C.K. for your lack of career?
Okay, I actually didn't have this question, but I want to ask you now. So, separating the art from the artist, and taking example of Bill Cosby here. So, he whatever he did was horrible. Was like we can't even talk about it. That's so horrible. But he was an amazing comic and inspiration for so many during his time. So, do you think that the art should be separated from the artist?
Yes. I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was a ladies' man, but he was
Yes.
still one of the world's greatest leaders. I even heard Gandhi used to like to sleep with young girls, but you know
Yes.
what? He was about peace. I know Winston Churchill didn't love him very much, and I know the English put India through fucking hell.
Yeah,
But
we there are theories about that, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. That people think that okay, Gandhi was a revolutionary leader, and he was he brought us independence. That's there is no doubt in that. But then again, there were a
you're doing your job. I don't care who you're sleeping with, what your weird quirks are. If you are governing a large body of people and your policies and your beliefs and your theories and your lectures and your politics are one with judge a person by the content of their character, and maybe you're cheating on Loretta Scott King, uh, go do what you got to do. Go do what you got to do, but just care about the American people, care about the Indian people, care about your people. I can separate it, and I've gotten into trouble. I'm like, I don't care what Louis C.K. Yeah, I could. Same with Bill Maher. I find him a bit of a misogynist. He really is like Barbara Eden was on Club Random, 92-year-old icon from I Dream of Jeannie. And he said, I used to masturbate to you. And it's like, was that necessary to do that to a 92-year-old woman? Like to say that? It was you did that on purpose. And it's like, if I ever met Bill Maher, I would just be waiting with questions to say, you are like an original incel. What is it about you that always has to be with young girls to just fuck them and not get close to anybody? What's your issue? What's your thing? How come you
and
can't
his
get married?
and his stand-ups are also very misogynistic and but anyways, okay. Thank you so much for coming. And before you go, I would just like to ask someone who has been doing this for over 3.5 decades. If there is a young girl who wants to start stand-up comedy today, she's very passionate about it. She loves comedy. What advice would you give her?
I tell her, get a thick skin. for the audience, for the hecklers, for the comedians, for the bookers, and make yourself undeniable. Stop using the victim card. Stop using the sex card. You chose this profession. You're going to be in for it. And just work on your craft. Work at being the best you can be. And just let everything roll off your back. Don't take anything personally. And don't drink with the other comedians. There's a double standard because they'll try and get you in bed. If you need to drink, just go in your hotel room and just go drink on your own. Go drink by yourself. Because if you blow some booker in Florida, everyone will hear about it in New York. And don't constantly rely on scatological humor or sexual humor. Like, just go really, really educate yourself and figure out what your persona is, what's going to make you stand out, and use everything you can use, every trick in the book you can, but really educate yourself. And I would tell that to anybody. You want power, it's going to be in education. It's not going to be in playing the victim card, trying not to offend anybody, doing the virtue signaling. It's understanding your truth and your light, and knowing at the end of the day, I always say when I perform comedy, I say for half an hour, I'm going to take people away. They're not going to think about their son that needs rehab. They're not going to think about their shitty marriage. They're not going to think about the fact that they can't stop drinking, or that they can't pay the bills, or that their mortgage is due. For half an hour, I'm just going to make everybody forget about their life. That's very difficult. And to me, that's what I try and do. I don't try and be a preacher. Anything I do, if I'm talking about greed, if I'm talking about Epstein files, if I'm talking about sociological stuff, I always say my job is to make it light and funny. That's my job. I have to read all this stuff, study all this stuff, break it down, figure it out, work on jokes till it gets funny and fine-tuned. But it's never to be a preacher. It's to just make people laugh and to take them away. That's the gift I've been given, is the gift that I can make people laugh. And the gift that they give me is I get so much joy that I can do that.
Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you so much. It was really lovely talking to you, and we talked about so many random things. I had so many questions prepared, but the conversation just went on naturally.
Well, I'm so glad you like comedians so much.